How long have you lived in this flat?
Since 84.
84. Yeah. And a lot of the work that you have on show now is what you've acquired since then, or
Oh yes.
were you collecting before?
Oh yes. I think the first thing that I collected is a Dutch painting, which is obviously very minor sort of Dutch painter, but I did find out who it was, but which I bought, or to be more precise, because I found it and wanted it. My parents bought it for me as a birthday present, I think, because it cost a whole £3 back in, well, I would have been 11 or 12 at the time, so I guess it would be about 48.
So did your parents appreciate art and collect art?
Oh yes, well, my painter friend David Tress, wandering round my house, he was particularly struck by a pair of charcoal drawings of stormy seas, which, and sort of especially liked them and wondered who had done them. And I had to tell him that they were done by my mother at the age of 13.
Wow.
And I've got a number of things that my mother did. I think they're nearly all down in the country. And she was also LRAM, though she wouldn't teach me the piano, but she was a qualified music teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always thought that it's a great pity that she lived in the sort of period when middle-class ladies, when they got married, they became housewives.
And gave up.
Because I think she had a lot of energy, and some of it quite creative, that was just not used. And I think she would have been a lot happier if she had. I mean,
but did she help cultivate your love of art?
well, not consciously, I don't think. And art, the visual arts, no, I don't think so, really. No, I think that's something I found for myself. And music, I suppose, because there was some music in the house of all kinds. My mother played the piano sometimes, and never anything terribly classical, but sort of popular classical.
Yes.
I remember one of her favourite pieces was Cocteau's In a Persian Market. She would play that, so I can still remember it in great detail. But no, I don't know. I mean, mostly I think I found things for myself that I really just found that I was interested in certain things, and I think, practically everything that I've ever collected or anything I've ever done, I've certainly everything that I've ever learned, I think I've taught myself rather than being taught by other people. Because, once my interest in something was fired in some way, then I would follow it up obsessively. I mean, as soon as I found an author that I didn't know anything about, but accidentally tumbled on his or her work, then I would follow it up and read everything. Like when I first discovered Denton Welch as a writer, I I found I could then get all his books out of the library at that time, and I read the complete published works in a week, and rather the same, only rather more spread out with Patrick Hamilton, who I feel some sort of personal glow in relation to, because in those days, this would be sometime in the 60s, I guess, that the London magazine had a series going of, well, basically rediscoveries of neglected writers. People would write about them and so on, and I, having discovered, I started by reading the Slaves of Solitude, encouraged. I picked up a copy in some bookshop. I spent a lot of time in bookshops, as you might imagine. So I picked up a copy in a bookshop, inspired by the note on the dust jacket that Betjeman had said how wonderful it was. And having read that, I realised immediately that I was in the grip of one of these obsessions.
Yes.
And in the next 6 months, I suppose, I did manage to find, because not a single book by Hamilton was in print at the time. He was more or less totally forgotten. And so I could find, or did find, all his books in second-hand bookshops, usually tucked away on bottom shelves with a lot of covered in dust and costing sort of 2 and 6 each, that kind of thing.
So is your art collection being acquired in a similar fashion?
Very much so, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, in the 60s, the early 60s, I think I actually moved in 1960, the first place that I sort of owned, i.e. that I was a leaseholder of after living in rented property up to then from my student days, was a flat in Camden Hill Towers, which was about the first private high-rise. Well, we thought it was a high-rise then because I think it ran to 18 floors.
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't look like anything impressive then, but which is a block right on top of Notting Hill Gate. So I had a flat on the 8th floor, 8th and 9th, because they're all
split level.
Split levels.
Yes.
Looking out over a great panorama of West London from the top of the hill. And of course that's just around the corner from the Portobello Road, so then I started going regularly to the Portobello Road and bought a lot of things. There's still a number of them that I bought there then, around here, though most have been acquired since.
The pictures in the corridor where we are now, these are mostly British 20th century.
Mostly, yes.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, there are obviously some that aren't.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, most of the odd thing. This is Michael Leonard's portrait of me in his series that he called, or Ted Lucy Smith told him he should call it Transitions, which is about seeing, I mean the way it started anyway, was that he found he was looking at certain people that he knew and thinking, oh, he or she looks as if they've walked straight out of a Cranach or a Reynolds portrait or whatever. And so this is me as a sort of 18th century miniature. And that's also by Michael Leonard. He's seen as a Hensel, I should say. It's a sort of Viennese coming at the time of Schubert, and which, without making him look more Chinese than he looks, but it's accurate
Yes,
in
yeah.
every way. So
Yes. Yeah. So let's have a look at some of your you have a Craxton here, don't you?
yeah, I have several Craxtons.
Several Craxtons.
Because I knew John very well.
Yes.
Yeah, so...
Did you ever visit him? Was it Crete where he moved to?
Yes, he did finally live in Crete. No, I never did. He still kept up a place in Hampstead, and I visited him there a couple of times. But for a while, I was supposed to be curating a big exhibition of his work for a gallery in Athens, but then for various reasons it all fell through.
Yes.
But, he wasn't the most reliable person as far as organisation
Yes.
was concerned. So
And you have Keith Vaughan as well, don't you?
that's a Vaughan.
That's right, yeah.
And I've also got a couple of designs for book jackets and an abstract which isn't quite as abstract as it's supposed to be. But yes, and Bawdens and Denton Welch and so on. I've always been interested in the neo-romantics, even Mervyn Peake. Even before they came back into fashion again, but they're gradually coming back now. Again, frequently by somebody putting on an exhibition, like a recent exhibition of John Minton at Talent House. Minton is about the only one that I don't have an example of.
Yeah,
but,
I had a Minton and I regrettably sold it.
Well, sometimes needs must.
Yeah, yeah. And the Ben Nicholson one is particularly charming.
I think so, and I believe it's Mosul.
Oh, right, yeah.
In the background, because this is obviously the same place in the 20s, and that it is a Nicholson, of course.
But this was sold to you as a Christopher
Wood, yeah.
Woods, yes. But you managed to confirm that it was.
Yes, well, by asking Ben, because I just wanted to know if it was in fact a portrait of him.
But you suspected it was,
Christopher.
didn't you?
Well, that's what I thought. Well, it looks like Ben Nicholson because there's a gallery label on the back saying sort of Breton fisherman Christopher Wood, and first of all I thought, well, it's obviously Nicholson-ish anyway, but I thought, well, that looks like photographs of Ben Nicholson from the mid-20s. I've even found somewhere one of him wearing the same sort of cap, and also with a slightly sideways nose, with which he made much use when I first saw him, when he'd moved back to England and was living and had a studio up in Hampstead. So I went to see him, I think, in the first place, to interview him for the Times. And I said, well, why did you come back to England? And he said, woman trouble me boy. So anyway, I took that to him and asked. But then anyway, he took one look at it and said, oh, I wondered where that had gone to. And I said, so it is a portrait of you by Christopher Wood? And he said, no, it's by me. He said, it's a self-portrait, as I remember it well, but I've lost touch with it. But there you go.
Yeah.
That's a Meninsky. That is my favourite of my Meninsky, is that one up there. But Now, Meninsky is another thing of what I was saying about once I got interested in something, I would follow it up obsessively, and the first Meninsky I bought was the oil in there. And having once bought a Meninsky and so on, I didn't know anything about him. I think maybe I'd heard the name and knew something about the generation of Anglo-Jewish artists who were all at the Slade at the same time in 1912. And so, but I then sort of became so obsessed that I have, first of all, I have, I think, 4 Meninskys at least. But I ended up writing a book about Meninsky, so sometimes it works that way. Like
Yes.
when I became interested in the emigres in Hollywood, which was partly through knowing, first of all, Hitch, and then the various other people of the same generation that I got to know in my 7 years. And so when they were mostly still alive, in their 70s or 80s by then, and so on. So once I got interested in the whole question of the emigres, I ended up becoming obsessed with that, and so after I'd finished the book about Hitchcock, I became one of a group of academics who at that time were taking an interest in various aspects of emigre culture in Los Angeles. I was the main one interested in the film connections, but I was interested in all the connections, obviously, music and so on.
Yes.
Obviously, from my bookshelves, 20th century music has been one of my great abiding interests.
Yes.
Also from the piles of CDs. So I ended up writing a book about that, which is one of my own favourites among my books.
Okay.
One about called Strangers in Paradise. It's about the emigres, all sorts of emigres, not only film people,
Yes.
but literary figures and so on in Los Angeles. So it's a pattern of obsession, I'm afraid.
Well, there's obviously a correlation between music, painting, and film.
Well, yes, I guess so, because most of my interests are concentrated on, well, the 20th century, and at that, the first half of the 20th century, and the fin de siècle period, hence my interest again, something that I discovered for myself, and nobody else was interested in it at the time. My interest in Art Nouveau book design and illustration, which led to, first of all, was the subject that I was researching for my MA at the Cocteau Institute, and then, of course, my thesis, suitably expanded and corrected, and all the rest of it ended up as my book, the Art Nouveau book in Britain. So,
yes,
eventually it all comes out somehow.
Indeed,
I always end up writing about the things I'm interested in. So.
Yeah. As I came in, I noticed you have an early Sutherland on the wall here.
That's right, yes.
How did this come about?
Well, I found it in St Ives, of all places, in a bookshop which also had a sort of gallery aspect to it. And I bought it. Wasn't expensive. I think it cost, I don't know, £70 or something. And the bookseller told me that he bought it, I think, somewhere in the Midlands. But anyway, he said, it says Sutherland, but I don't think it is. I think that's sort of optimistic. so on, but I just liked it a lot, and so I bought it. And then again, for following things up, I discovered that Sutherland, when he was still a student at Camberwell, he assisted his tutor then, who was doing murals for one of the sort of, I think, what we would now call Indonesia, the pavilion in the Empire Exhibition of 1924-25. And there's a quote in the, I have a book of Sutherland's writings, and in one of them he refers to this and says that he was doing murals in a style, or assisting the guy to do murals, in a style somewhere between the Edouard Rousseau and I forget who else, but anyway. And so obviously this was the one of the sketches for that.
Right.
And I did know Sutherland slightly, but very slightly. So it's like those at the top there, which is a series of very early Hans Feibusch, which again I bought in the Portobello Road, and the four of them cost me £120, and the guy who sold them to me didn't know who they were by. I had a good idea, which I was able to confirm subsequently, because partly because the frames turned out they were at the back that there's a frame maker's
stamp,
label, whatever, so that they were framed in Frankfurt, which is where, and I asked the guy who sold them to me where they came from, what he knew about them, and so on. And he said, well, they belonged to a Jewish family of emigres who had come over in 1933, I think, bringing their collection with them, and they'd fled, even though they were Christian converts, and that they belonged to them, and then I knew Hans, because I did an interview to celebrate his 100th year, and which Joan took the photographs for, and so I asked him about them, and yes, he remembered that during this series, it's there is a proper term for it, but I don't know what it is. It's like a truncated version of the Stations of the Cross, but it's just four crucial things. One of them is Veronica, one of them obviously is crucifixion.
Arguably the most crucial.
What they are.
Yeah. And I've just noticed Frederick Etchells.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I've always been interested in the vortices, but that's the only one I've ever been able to afford to buy.
Yeah. Let's have a look at some of the pictures here.
Sure.
What to choose from, really. It's such a...
Oh, I didn't mention that one of the pictures there is the one under the Feibusch is by Lord Bernars, because I've always found him extremely interesting. I have all his musical works, and I think I mean all, on CD, I've got all his books, mostly in first editions, often because there wasn't more than one edition, of course, and so on. And so I was very excited when I found one of his paintings as well, which I bought in the Portobello Road. So another example of following an obsession.
Yes, yeah. And the overlapping between music and painting. He was Composer of the Week a while ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think he's rather an interesting composer.
Mm-hmm.
Diaghilev thought so.
Indeed,
a couple of times.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. So what stands out for you here in particular?
Well, obviously the Nicholson self-portrait.
I like these little landscapes, and the atmosphere, particularly in these two.
Yes, I like this. That I don't know who it's by. I just again bought it in the Portobello Road because I liked it. That's by a French artist, sort of symbolist period, called René Bilotte, and there's actually a little piece about him in number 1 of the studio. I have a complete run of the studios up to 1914, I think. Bound editions of down in the country, so which was very useful to me when I was studying my Art Nouveau book illustrations.
Indeed.
Yes, I always like that.
Yes.
But then, often, I'm sure you must find too, that you can't really explain why particular pictures have. I mean, this, which is by a Hungarian artist, and it's a bridge in Budapest. But I just like it. I find it haunting in a way, so on. But why that in particular, I couldn't possibly tell you. And that I've always liked, and that I bought from the ineffable Roy Miles when he was first bringing in his Russian realist paintings. And that's by Zernova, who mostly was known for these huge pictures of Uncle Joe around, surrounded by the worshipping populace and so on. And that she painted in India just to please herself when she was making a cultural trip there. And so I think it's a beautiful painting in itself, but also the background, the story fascinates me. Because, again, it's something you would never guess. It would be a thing that would turn up, but I just like to know the background stories, if possible. Though ultimately, all that matters is
it's the work
itself. I like it in the work itself.
Yeah.
And that's why I've got everything that I have got. So. I love these Shannon fans, which you can hardly see at the moment because they're hidden by piles of other things. That's Ayrton design for the immediately post-war production of The Fairy Queen, which combined the forces of the Royal Ballet and the Covent Garden Opera. So. something I bought the other day. That's one of the three things that I bought on my last visit to the Portobello Road.
And you found space for it?
I found space for it.
And the Cocteau one, how did you acquire that?
Oh, again, in the Portobello Road. And it's got a little label, obviously, on the back for clearly from the 20s, saying that it's by Cocteau. So I don't think there's any reason to disbelieve that. No, this I bought because, and again, it's something that I'm rather pleased, because the following up the research, which always fascinates me, because I bought it again just because I liked it, no attribution, whatever, but it is signed or initialed rather indistinctly in this corner, so I could see it was A something, and but then looking at it, I think probably even before I bought it, I thought, it looks like an Anthony Ayrton, maybe a very early one, and so on. The style looked to me like Ayrton. And so then I checked it out, and when I looked more closely, I could see that the initials were A.E. And I have a book on Ayrton, so I went to that and found that a couple of his very early things, when he was 21, he'd been to art school already, then he was in the army because it was during the war. And a couple of them were signed in exactly the same way, with A.E. in the corner.
Well done.
And it was like Wendy Barron once identified for me something which, again, I bought just because I liked it. It's a picture of a vase of convolvulus, I think. And I bought it really because I thought that's the nearest I'm ever going to come to owning a Paul Nash, because it's very Paul Nashy in style and so on, and that's signed E.A. And I couldn't think who this was, and Wendy was once visiting me and looked at it and said, "Oh yes, Eileen Agar." And I said, "Eileen Agar?" And she said, "Oh yes, it must be." I said, "Well, I bought it because it looked like a Nash." And she said, "Well, of course she had a sort of 10-year affair with Paul Nash, so
yes, yeah.
that would explain it." So,
Yeah.
That's a condor down under there, hidden under the thing. It's an Australian drawing, which and somebody who came as a supposed expert said, it couldn't be condor, of course, it's signed, but they said, "Oh, incredibly rare," and so on. No, it couldn't be, and so on. And they said, anyway, it doesn't look Australian. The next person who visited me was an Australian friend, a designer who worked for the English National Opera, and he took one look at it and said, "Oh, that must be Australian, because look at that tree. That's an Australian tree, it couldn't be anything else." And I thought, so much for expertise. So that's a condor too, which I sort of recognised and found out that it was actually exhibited in the Leicester Gallery in, I think, 1914. I forgot the information I put the information on the back. It's called On the Terrace, but that's one of my favourite things, actually. I just like that a lot. I always think that I'm not cut out to be an academic, but though I have been for a while, as you know. But I guess that my passion for research suggests that perhaps I am.